In the second year after our divorce, Luis seemed to regret it. On the day I won Best Actress, he publicly confessed his love in front of all the media. Deeply and affectionately, he asked me to give him another chance. Yet, for no reason, I thought of the day we divorced. He had said coldly and arrogantly, "I never give anyone the chance to regret." What a coincidence. Neither do I. Chapter 01. The host called my name twice. On the big screen, golden letters read, Best Actress of the 29th Golden Frame Awards, Olivia. Waves of applause surged around my ears. My emotions churned. I had no choice but to lower my head and use the motion of adjusting my skirt to force back the heat in my eyes. The director beside me was also so excited that her face had turned red. She kept patting my shoulder, saying congratulations over and over. We had fought side by side for nearly 5 months. No one knew better than she did how much effort I had poured into this film. I rose gracefully, dragging my elaborate skirt. I walked toward the podium step by step. At one side of the stage, a staff member ran up ahead of me. She stuffed a new cue card into the host's hand. The two of them looked at me in astonishment at the same time. Before I could understand the meaning of that look, my foot caught first. I staggered 2 steps, just as I was about to contribute a famous scene of falling flat on my face on the award stage. A hand reached out from the side and steadily caught my elbow. Careful. That familiar, steady voice was like a whip striking my eardrum. It made my whole body tremble. I had no time to think about why he was here. I straightened up, pulled my hand free, ignored his bent arm, and walked straight onto the stage. The host was reading aloud with passion. Let us welcome with applause the surprise guest presenting Olivia with the Best Actress Award, Mr. Luis. Chapter 02. Luis took the trophy from the etiquette staff. Facing the microphone, he spoke with ease and confidence. As long as he wanted to, he could make anyone who spoke with him feel as if they were basking in a spring breeze. At first, there were still some whispers below the stage. Gradually, it quieted down. Nowadays, the film and television industry was in decline, but Luis's Songchuang Interactive Entertainment was backed by his family group. Its investment projects burned money like running water, and it would not be an exaggeration to call him extremely wealthy. Everyone gave him face. Anyone who met him would show him respect first. Standing behind him and looking at his straight, broad shoulder line, I was momentarily dazed. Inappropriately, my mind drifted back to 2 years ago, to the morning when I asked him for a divorce. At that time, we had not seen each other or contacted each other for 2 months. When I saw him early that morning, I rubbed my eyes hard. When did you come back? The question was thrown into the air like a handful of snow melting into water. It did not even create the slightest ripple. Luis sat beside the kitchen island, his eyes fixed on the computer screen. A wave of exhaustion suddenly surged up from the bottom of my heart. I took a deep breath. Luis, let's get divorced. The hands typing on the keyboard paused. His gaze moved from the screen to my face for the first time. In that instant, I even thought, pitifully and humbly, as long as he asked why, as long as he opened his mouth to make me stay, I would definitely take back those words. But Luis merely nodded. All right. He picked up the coffee at hand and took a sip. Perhaps it was too bitter, because he frowned and set it down again. If this is what you've seriously considered, I respect it. But you need to know that I never give anyone the chance to regret. After saying that, he put away his computer and left without another word. That afternoon, his assistant came to my door with the divorce agreement he had already signed. Chapter 03. Throughout the entire divorce process, Luis never showed up. His assistant said his schedule was busy and that he could not spare the time. As soon as I received the divorce certificate, I posted it on Weibo, as if I were using that action to declare a certain kind of determination. The trending topics that day were lively. Some people dug up photos of me blowing kisses at the paparazzi camera when Luis and I were dating, as well as that one sensational wedding of the century, sighing that even the greatest love eventually ended up just like that. Others enthusiastically analyzed how much of Luis's fortune I could split away. Even more people watched the joke. They called me an abandoned wife from a wealthy family, saying that my dream had shattered overnight and I had been swept out the door. I knew it all. All I could do was grit my teeth and pretend to be calm and carefree as I buried my head and moved forward. It had not been easy to reach this day. I was about to welcome the highlight moment of my life. Luis should not have come. I lowered my eyes and stared expressionlessly at the embroidery on my skirt. It is my honor to present Olivia with such a symbolic trophy. Through the microphone, Luis's voice was slightly distorted. As though carrying a smile, he turned sideways and motioned for me to step forward. My hand had already touched the trophy, but he showed no intention of letting go. I had no choice but to raise my head and look at him. Under the brilliant lights, his usually cold eyes held a trace of warmth, and the words he spoke also sounded intimate and lingering. Olivia, has your anger subsided? If it has, can you give me a chance to pursue you again? Chapter 04. Inside the car, there was only the tapping sound of typing. The tinted glass cut off the endless flashes outside. My manager, Roxana, placed her phone face down, let out a long breath, and cursed. They're all asking about your relationship with Luis. The exclusive interviews we had scheduled are asking if they can change them into joint interviews. All the press releases we prepared about your award and acting skills are useless now. Luis did this on purpose, didn't he? Is there something wrong with his brain? When it came to criticizing her former big boss, Roxana was not afraid at all. Roxy, the brand says that all of Olivia's gown and jewelry tonight, my assistant, Zach, cut in. She stumbled as she read out the message from the other party. Were purchased and gifted by Mr. Luis as a keepsake. A specialist will deliver them to your residence in the coming days. Roxana hissed as if her tooth hurt, then looked at me, wanting to speak but stopping herself. I lowered my head and looked at the phone spread across my knees. In just a few short minutes, trending search terms had already dominated half the screen. Real-time Weibo posts poured out like running water. Can someone read Luis's eyes after Olivia said no? He looked like he was about to shatter. Shipping them. This is exactly the kind of second chance romance I live for. Mom and Dad, please get back together. Where do I pray to get a man as rich and affectionate as Luis? This year's Best Actress is so weak. Turns out it was rigged. No wonder the people below the stage looked so strange when the award was presented. They must have known it was predetermined. So after all that, everyone was just a tool for a big shot to coax his spoiled little wife? Roxana sighed and took my phone away. Stop looking. It'll affect your mood. Don't think about anything. Go home and get a good night's sleep. The smoothly moving car suddenly braked. Roxana cried out, ouch, covered her forehead, and complained, Nestor, how are you driving? The driver glanced awkwardly ahead. A Bentley was blocking the road in front of us. The car did not move at all. Even its headlights were off. It had almost blended into the night. What kind of person parks their car here? Do they have no public decency? Roxana prepared to get out and check. No need. I stopped her and leaned back against the seat. Ram it. What did you say? Roxana was astonished. A moment later, as if she understood something, she pursed her lips and said no more. In the rearview mirror, Nestor exchanged a look with me. I said calmly, ram it. He gritted his teeth, hardened his heart, and started the vehicle. 5 meters, 3 meters, 1 meter. The distance between the two cars grew closer and closer. The Bentley, which had lain dormant for a long time, suddenly turned on its headlights. 2 beams of light pierced through the night like swords. Almost instantly, Nestor slammed on the brakes. The Alfred barely stopped 2 finger widths away from the Bentley. After the slight dizziness disappeared, I got out of the car with a dark expression. A person got out of the Bentley's passenger seat and eagerly opened the rear door. Luis, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, looked at me with calm composure. Luis, what exactly are you trying to do? Get in first. He nodded toward the seat beside him. I looked at him quietly. The soft reading light cast a shadow over his face. His eyes were also hidden in the shadow, dark and unreadable. I gave you 2 years. Haven't you made enough of a fuss yet? Chapter 05. Had I made enough of a fuss? Luis used to say that often too. At first, it was when I was dating him. He had just taken over the group's affairs and was so busy his feet barely touched the ground. During the dates he managed to squeeze into the gaps. I would cling to him and refuse to get down. He would hold me up, and in the pauses between kisses, ask in a sticky voice whether I had made enough of a fuss. 1 year after we got married, he became even busier. Endless overtime, endless meetings, endless business trips. If I wanted to see him, I had to make an appointment with his assistant first. After listening to my complaints, he tiredly pinched the space between his brows. Olivia, I've been running nonstop this entire month. It wasn't easy for me to squeeze out time, and it wasn't so I could listen to you lose your temper. Have you made enough of a fuss? I had a stomach full of things I wanted to say. For example, the last time I accompanied his mother to a dinner party, someone at the table insisted that I sing a song I had once performed at the Spring Festival Gala right there on the spot. Everyone was egging me on. Even his mother felt that the way I declined was beneath the dignity of the occasion and scolded me the whole way back. Actually, I was not being petty. I just felt that in that kind of setting, it seemed no one truly respected me. For example, I had turned down a very good script because the filming period was long, and it was out of town. I was afraid it would delay the already pitifully little time we had together. But before I even had the chance to say any of that, his single sentence, "Have you made enough of a fuss?" scattered everything like smoke. The last time was before I asked him for a divorce. He had finished a merger and acquisition project and was rarely at home. We watched the Golden Frame Awards together. The artist who won Best Actress was Emma. A few days earlier, we had met at a brand dinner. In the past, the two of us had never gotten along. Two queens could not share the same room, and neither of us looked kindly upon the other. Yet now, we could actually exchange pleasantries at the same table in peace. Her tone was mocking. So even a wealthy madam has to come socialize? Well, that makes sense, with the title of a rich family's wife hanging over your head. Who wouldn't want to curry favor with you? A brand would be secretly delighted just to invite you. Unlike us, we have to work ourselves half to death filming, and only when we're famous enough will people bother to look at us. But then again, at least everything we hold in our hands is something we earned ourselves. Don't you think? Luis held his phone, listening on and off. Suddenly, he said, after saying all that, "What do you want?" I stared blankly at him, as if a basin of ice water had been poured over me from head to toe. Luis stood up with little patience. If her words were unpleasant and you want to teach her a lesson, find Pablo and have him arrange it. If you're envious of her winning an award, this year won't be easy. But next year, find yourself an easy production crew, and I'll smooth things over for you. In a few words, he drew his conclusion. I have a business trip tomorrow. Sleep early. I brushed away the hand he had placed on my shoulder. Luis rubbed his fingertips together. His expression remained unchanged as he pointed at me. Fine. Keep making a fuss. We'll talk when you've had enough. I sat on the sofa all night. When dawn was nearly breaking, I had no choice but to admit it. This marriage I had staked everything on had been a complete and utter failure. Chapter 06. I rested at home for a week. In a week, even the most sensational gossip would turn into a stagnant pool, unable to stir up any waves. When Roxana came over, I was flipping through the latest seasonal pieces sent by brands. Recently, brand representatives had been visiting every day. Clothes and jewelry were delivered in waves. I accepted them all without exception. Roxana clicked her tongue twice. You're certainly relaxed. She took out her phone, which was buzzing nonstop, and casually tossed it onto the table. Luis's assistant has almost blown up my phone. My fault. I pressed my hands together in apology. That day, I had told Luis that if he insisted on talking, he should make an appointment with my manager. What's there to blame you for? Roxana shot me a sideways glance. That's what he should do. I even think he's not sincere enough. The resources he sent aren't high-grade enough. As she spoke, she took a script out of her bag and handed it to me. Romeo, the internationally renowned director, is coming out of retirement after 9 years and has invited you to audition for the female lead. This is barely decent enough. A famous director at the helm, a sizable investment, and a reliable team that had swept every award. Any one of those conditions alone would be enough to make people fight until their heads bled. If you're interested, there's a dinner tonight. Come with me. Roxana paused, then said reluctantly, the thing is, Luis is also one of the investors. If you don't want to go. On the beautifully bound script cover, the two large words mountains and rivers were printed in flamboyant strokes. I traced the slightly raised lettering. I'll go. Why wouldn't I? Chapter 07. The dinner was set at a local private club known for its understated luxury. At 7:30, the business van slowly drove into the underground garage under the security guard's directions. After getting out, Roxana encouraged me, "Bring out your battle mode. We're definitely taking this one." I knew she was not confident either. When I was with Luis, my studio had been attached to Zhongchuang. As an industry leader, Zhongchuang had its own independent film and television production company and broadcasting platform. Naturally, there had been no need to worry about resources. After the divorce, he transferred the portion of shares held on his behalf to me. The studio also officially separated from Zhongchuang. The good news was that I had absolute say. But the studio had so many employees. During the period after marriage when I had practically half retired from acting, the studio had also signed several promising newcomers. Venue costs, manpower, publicity and promotion, every single item burned money. Let's go. I took a deep breath. The corridor was deep and dim, with yellowish wall lamps. The black walnut door of the private room was left ajar. A crisp laugh, mixed with a warm, fragrant scent, spilled all over the floor. Behind me, Roxana spat. "What rotten luck. Why is she here too?" Chapter 08. She was talking about Camila, a popular young actress who had risen to fame through idol dramas, an artist heavily promoted by the talent agency under Zhongchuang, a female celebrity who had recently been rumored to be involved with Luis. In the candid photo, she had a man's suit jacket draped over her shoulders. Luis stood sideways, extending his hand slightly to shield her from the surrounding crowd. It also looked as though he were holding her in his arms. Many people guessed that she was Luis's new love. Riding on that wave of attention, she had snatched away several endorsements and scripts I had already negotiated. Someone in the private room noticed me and took the initiative to greet me. I walked over with a smile. First, I exchanged a few pleasantries with Romeo, then let my gaze sweep around the table. Luis raised his brows, one hand propped on the table, watching me with effortless ease. Camila's seat was next to his. She glanced at me, then quickly withdrew her gaze and tilted her head to say something to Luis. I ignored it and took out the collector's Blu-ray disc of one of Romeo's early works, which I had prepared long ago. "Mr. Romeo, I'd like to ask for your autograph." Using the autograph as an opportunity, I naturally sat down in the empty seat beside him. Romeo unscrewed the pen cap, seeming pleasantly surprised. This film didn't sell well back then. Only a few hundred copies were released. But I personally like it very much. "You put thought into this." A cold, heavy gaze that almost felt tangible pierced into me. I pretended not to notice. Chapter 09. With the disc opening up the conversation, Romeo and I chatted happily. He even brought over the literary consultant to discuss with me the characters and plot settings in Mountains and Rivers. When the drinks had warmed everyone up, someone at the table began to stir things up. "Ms. Olivia has toasted everyone at the table. Why hasn't she had a drink with Luis?" I looked over in slight surprise. I wanted to know who was so tactless, but as soon as I raised my head, I happened to meet Luis's amused gaze. He picked up his glass and gently swirled it, the clear liquor rippling with fragmented light. "Romeo, I'm very interested in this film of yours. I can increase my investment." He thought for a moment, then named a figure. Around the table, there were faint sounds of people drawing in sharp breaths. Even Romeo's eyes brightened a little. "The condition is..." Luis tilted his head and looked at me. "She plays the female lead. Now, Ms. Olivia, would you be willing to honor me with a drink? 9 figures for 1 glass of wine. How generous." My face darkened, seeing that I still did not move. Luis was not annoyed. He pointed again at Camila beside him. "Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to fight for this role for my own artist." The atmosphere froze for a moment. Romeo smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Mr. Luis's support for the development of the film industry is a good thing." Luis only smiled without speaking, simply staring at me. A murky breath clogged my chest, unable to be spat out or swallowed down. I slowly reached out and picked up the wine glass in front of me. Then I turned my wrist. Under Luis's puzzled gaze, I unhesitatingly turned the glass upside down on the table. "I've had too much. I'm afraid I'll throw up. I can't drink Mr. Luis's wine. My apologies." Chapter 10. Unable to stay any longer, I found an excuse and left first with Roxana. In the empty corridor, another set of footsteps soon followed. neither hurried nor slow, trailing behind us. Just as Roxana and I entered the elevator, a hand suddenly braced against the elevator door. "You, get out." Luis stood at the entrance, not even glancing at Roxana as he coldly spat out the words. Roxana puffed up her chest and blocked me like a mother hen. "It's fine, Roxana, you go out," I spoke, squeezing her hand to reassure her. Luis had always been stubborn. He would not stop until he achieved his goal, although I did not know what exactly he wanted to do. Since I could not avoid it, I might as well make everything clear. Roxana hesitated before walking out. Then, "I'll wait for you in the garage." The light in the elevator was glaringly bright. Even harder to endure was Luis's probing gaze falling on my face. In the cramped space, only silence spread. I had to admit that when it came to maintaining silence, Luis had always been outstanding. In the past, I always tried every possible way to pester him into speaking. I kept demanding communication and explanations. Only later did I understand that silence was the natural privilege of those in power. In this relationship, from the very beginning, Luis had sat firmly on the high platform. "Why?" Luis abruptly spoke. He leaned against the elevator wall, slightly lowered his head, and looked at me seriously. There was obvious confusion in his eyes. "Olivia, what was your reason for divorcing me?" After a year and a half, I finally heard the words I had once longed for so desperately, at a time when I no longer needed them. "Does it matter?" I asked in return. "It doesn't matter. What matters is, Luis, we're already divorced." I looked at him calmly. "I remember you said that you never give anyone the chance to regret. So what about you? What are you doing now? Do you regret it?" Just when I thought Luis would not answer, he suddenly said softly, "Perhaps." He did not look at me, focusing instead on the panel where the numbers kept jumping. "In these 2 years, no one else has appeared by your side. So why did you want a divorce?" Luis exhaled heavily. "No matter what it is, I can solve it. Come back to me. I can give you everything you want. If you want to keep acting in films, I'll give you the best resources. You don't need to be like this now, racking your brains to please others at dinner parties." When he said those words, he lowered his eyes. In his dark pupils, I saw myself framed within them, and once again, I deeply realized, in truth, he had never truly seen me. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I smiled at Luis and crooked my finger. He raised his brows. Though puzzled, he still cooperated and leaned down. In the next instant, I withdrew my smile and expressionlessly raised my hand, giving him a crisp slap across the face. At that exact moment, the elevator stopped with a ding. I walked around him and left directly. Chapter 11. The car sped through the night. The phone screen lit up, and Luis glanced at it. For tonight's dinner with Romeo, he had postponed a meeting long scheduled with a certain leader from the planning bureau. Fortunately, the other party did not mind. His deputy dutifully reported the details of tonight's meeting from beginning to end. Impatient and restless, he replied with a few lines. The spot on his face where he had been slapped was faintly swollen. In his memory, this should have been the first time Olivia had lost her temper with him. For some reason, he subconsciously opened the chat window with Olivia. Across the chat interface lay a glaring red exclamation mark. He skipped over it out of habit. Looking through the WeChat messages Olivia had sent him in the past was a pastime he had recently developed. Sometimes, he would marvel at how Olivia had such an abundant desire to share. A cloud in the sky, a flower on a branch, anything could spark her interest. After reading them more often, he also noticed a few things. First, the messages she sent him became fewer and fewer, shorter and shorter. Sometimes she would not send even one message in a month. Second, he almost never replied to her. He did not even give perfunctory responses like or okay. During the period after he married Olivia, it happened to coincide with the critical stage of the group's business transformation. A heavy responsibility pressed down on his shoulders. He truly could not spare any extra attention. But it was not as though this was the first day he had been so busy. When he and Olivia were dating, there were also times when they would only see each other once every 10 days or half a month. Back then, Olivia never made unreasonable trouble. Whenever the two of them met, she was always happy and joyful. Her luminous eyes would curve into a smile, hooking at his heart until it swayed. That kind of smile had become rare after marriage. She always lowered her brows and followed behind his mother obediently, trying hard to learn how to become a qualified madam. Those things that had once been so vigorous and full in her, that had made his heart surrender, that were called vitality, also became fewer and fewer. But the wheels rolled forward. On a roadside advertising light box, Olivia's radiant, spirited smile flashed by. On the day her new film was released, he had gone to watch it too, a late-night private screening. In the empty theater, he and Olivia on the screen looked at each other. He watched her run, shout, and struggle on the screen, like a sword tempered into a cold edge. She once again disturbed his heart. He had no choice but to admit it. He was once again attracted to Olivia. Now, the group's business had already entered the right track. He finally had time to re-examine that past marriage. He hated things left unresolved. His heart still stirred for Olivia. He needed a stable rear base, no matter which angle he looked at it from. Olivia was very suitable for him. Once he made up his mind, he never hesitated. Pablo, Luis ordered in a low voice. Go do something for me. Chapter 12. Romeo's new film had yet to be settled. I joined another crew first. It was a spy war film that had been negotiated long ago. On set, I saw someone unexpected, Camila. For some reason, when she saw me, she looked somewhat panicked. Roxana came back after probing for information. Luis shoved her in. There was no need for her to follow me around on set. But even before leaving, she still could not figure it out. What exactly does Luis mean? Camila had not systematically come into contact with the way films were shot before. On the first day of filming, she caused quite a few NGs. The director scolded her on the spot until her eyes turned red. My assistant Zach told me about it as a joke. Before she could finish speaking, there was new movement on set. A dozen or so food trucks drove in grandly. Zach had sharp eyes. Isn't the logo on the food truck in the middle from that Cantonese restaurant you like? The door to the lounge was politely knocked. Luis's assistant, Pablo, stood at the doorway carrying an exquisite food box. He said that Luis had arranged these food trucks, from pre-meal desserts to after-meal fruit, coffee, milk tea, burgers, and snacks. Everything was available. The chefs had been poached from 5-star hotels and Michelin restaurants. They would follow the crew throughout the entire process and provide service 24 hours a day. He methodically took the items out of the food box and filled the table with them. This portion of yours was prepared strictly according to your nutritional intake standards. The boss cares about you very much. I let out a scoff. How much does he pay you to make it worth being this diligent? Pablo still wore a polite smile. Go back and tell Luis to stop making futile attempts. We divorced long ago. It's over. Done. Completely and utterly unrelated. Pablo displayed the consistent composure of an outstanding worker. All right, I will convey your opinion. I did not know how he conveyed it. The next day, I saw Luis on set. Chapter 13. Camila's filming was not going smoothly. For some reason, she was never able to get into character. After filming my solo shots, I helped her act out her lines from outside the camera frame. We had not filmed more than 2 takes when a cold voice sounded from behind the monitor. Why not film the next scene first? I turned my head. Luis stood not far away, arms crossed over his chest. Camila clearly drew in a sharp breath. The next scene was a confrontation scene between her and me. There was a large amount of conflict and physical struggle. After adjusting my state and saying my lines, I followed the script and raised my hand to slap Camila. Under normal circumstances, this was a staged camera angle. Camila should have cooperated with my movement and turned her face to the side in accordance with it. But she did not move. She took the slap directly. I froze for a moment. Camila lowered her head and apologized. I'm sorry. Let's do it again. The second time, she still did not dodge. This time, tears filled her eyes. It's all my fault. The third time, before I could swing my hand down, she lifted her head and took the initiative to meet it. After taking 3 slaps in a row, her face was slightly red and swollen. I stared at her for a long while, then turned back and looked at Luis. He raised his brows slightly and asked the director, "Why aren't you continuing?" Camila's tears fell in large drops. Olivia. I'm sorry. Stop crying. I waved to Zach, who was waiting nearby. I took a pack of tissues from her hand and stuffed it into Camila's. Director, neither of us is in a good state. Can we take a short break? I asked the director, but he first glanced at Luis. The latter nodded almost imperceptibly. All right. Then everyone adjust for a while. With a wave of his hand, the director called out loudly. I walked toward Luis. Come with me, with a smile at the corners of his lips. Luis adjusted his cuff and slowly followed. Chapter 14. There were staff members coming and going nearby. I brought Luis back to the trailer. Zach guarded the door nervously. Luis looked around and commented without the slightest courtesy. The interior is too poor, and the space is too small. You're using this? Contact Pablo and have him replace it for you. I did not want to beat around the bush with him. What is going on with Camila? Luis sat down on the sofa. He crossed his legs and lazily fiddled with the strap of the watch on his wrist. She's apologizing to you. That's all, he said lightly. As an artist heavily promoted under Zhongchuang, Camila had taken on several major projects invested in by Zhongchuang. In order to build momentum for her, Luis had attended several events with her. That was how the photo of them together had come about. I didn't expect her to be so bold, daring to use my name to swindle and show off. I heard she even intercepted your resources? Luis shook his head and laughed mockingly. Roxana is getting worse and worse as she ages. She can't even handle something this minor anymore. Camila isn't suitable for this role. Have her leave. I interrupted him. Everyone is here to make a good work. You forced her in here, which not only damages her reputation but also drags down the crew. Luis narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at me. I only wanted to send him away as soon as possible. Besides, there's no question of whether she needs to apologize to me. Business comes and goes. I don't rely solely on that for a living. If we really have to say who was wrong, then if you hadn't tacitly allowed it, no one would have dared to do this. The photo of them in the same frame at the beginning might have been for publicity, but the later rumors about his new love, which had grown louder and louder, would never have been allowed to appear by the PR team without his approval. Luis was dazed for a moment. Then a smile appeared on his face. He admitted it readily. That's right. I was testing you. Testing what? Whether I cared that he was with another woman? Or whether he wanted to tell me, look, the things you want can be casually given to someone else by me. Once you leave me, you will definitely regret it. I said calmly. Then you've seen it too. My attitude is that I don't care. Yes, Luis nodded. So I'm very curious. He raised his face and asked as though seeking knowledge. Olivia, did you ever love me? Chapter 15. It was as if a wad of soaked willow catkins were lodged in my throat. I pinched my slightly trembling fingertips. I felt wronged for the version of myself from the past, who had once offered up a sincere heart. Luis, from what position are you asking this question? I swallowed the bitterness in my mouth. Are you worthy of asking this question? Do you understand what love is? Luis's expression darkened. He stared at me without moving his gaze away. After a moment, he shook his head and let out a soft laugh. It sounds like you hold a very deep grudge against me. Not really. I slowly exhaled. Even if there is resentment, it isn't toward you. I blame myself for taking things too much for granted. A person like you is only suited for the romance and poetry of love. It was just that I had failed to see clearly. Life was not a fairy tale. The ending between him and me would not stop it from then on. The prince and princess lived happily ever after. Luis frowned. You think I was not qualified enough as a husband? I could not hold back and laughed out loud. No one's husband requires an appointment through an assistant to be seen, and no one's wife needs to rely on the news, an assistant, or other people's conversations to know her husband's whereabouts. Luis changed into a helpless expression. That was because the group's affairs were too busy to handle. That's right, you were so busy. So busy that he had no time to reply to a single message. So busy that when I was hospitalized for a week with sudden gastroenteritis, he only hurried over for 15 minutes. So busy that I swallowed all my grievances alone and slowly wore away the heart that loved him. Luis pressed hard against the bone of his brow. Olivia, when we got married back then, I looked at Luis seriously. Your mother warned me. That elegant and noble lady had spoken with the tone of someone experienced. Since I had married Luis and formed a family, someone needed to give. Someone needed to maintain it. Many times, one had to endure and step back. But why was it always me? I asked softly. Luis pressed his lips together. His expression gradually restrained itself, finally revealing a hint of seriousness. I always remembered that you said being with me felt comfortable. I laughed self-mockingly. Could it be because, in our relationship, I was always the one receiving your emotions? I kept satisfying your needs. When you were happy, I accompanied your happiness. When your face turned even slightly cold, I thought of ways to coax you. When you didn't need me, it was best if I didn't exist at all. It had truly been too exhausting. You are a successful boss and a romantic lover, but you cannot be a qualified husband. The responsibility of a family was too light to you, light enough that you dismissed it with contempt. Perhaps you are suited to a wife who flatters you wholeheartedly, or who treats being Mrs. Luis as a job, but that person is not me. Luis anxiously reached out, wanting to catch my wrist. Olivia, stop talking. I dodged. His warm fingertips brushed slightly over my wrist, then fell powerlessly. Luis's voice was strained. It was my fault. He paused for a moment. You never said these thoughts before. Now I know. I'll try to change. I can learn to receive you. You won't need to carefully please me everywhere. You don't need to give. You don't need to step back. You can do anything you want. Perhaps because he had never lowered his head before. Even this self-reflection sounded like a favor when spoken from his mouth. This is the second problem between us. Without giving Luis time to react, I said it all in one breath. The "you can do anything you want" from your mouth has actually already framed a range. It has to fit the identity of Mrs. Luis. You, your family, and that so-called circle of yours have never truly respected me. In your eyes, what am I? No matter how many awards I win, no matter how glamorous I look, I'm still nothing more than an actress meant to entertain others. It was marrying Luis back then that had given me an illusion. I thought I had been accepted. I thought that so-called gap could be crossed as long as I worked hard and stood on tiptoe. But that was not true. It existed in the faintly contemptuous looks at every gathering. It was in the scripts and exposure I had no choice but to give up because they would damage his family's dignity. It was in Luis's high and mighty attitude even when he apologized. Luis's face darkened. Is that what you think? It isn't what I think. It is what all of you have done, I said calmly. Zach's figure flashed past outside the trailer window. I glanced at the time. It was almost time to go back to set. Luis, don't come again. Before leaving, I said one final thing. I don't know why you suddenly act as if you love me very much and must win me back, but our ending is just right here. Chapter 16. Camila left the crew 3 days later. The schedule had been delayed by nearly a week, yet neither the director nor the producer seemed anxious. Zach secretly asked around. Apparently, Zhongchuang had stepped in to cover that portion of the losses and had also added another investment to the production. Even the producer said that it had been a long time since he had fought such a well-funded battle. I also met the person replacing Camila in the role, Emma. The moment we met, she raised a brow. It's rare that you still remember how to act. But unfortunately, in this film, the one everyone remembers will only be me. Even so, she would still take the trouble to feed me lines when I was filming. She would also argue with me until we were both red in the face over how a scene should be shot. Halfway through filming, during a night shoot, while we were waiting for sunrise, Emma sat down beside me. That interrogation scene yesterday. You acted well. Thank you. I poured a cup of hot tea from my thermos and handed it to her. Emma took it. After this film wraps, I'm going to give myself a vacation first. What about you? She held the paper cup, her gaze fixed on the curling mist of tea. When we met before, I might have said some unpleasant things. Don't take them to heart. Why are you saying that? I was somewhat surprised. Emma curled her lips, her gaze drifting past me. In the shadows not far behind me, a Maybach was parked. Doesn't the old saying go, better to demolish 10 temples than ruin one marriage? If you gave up being a perfectly good wealthy madam because of some nonsense I said, wouldn't that make me guilty? A few dim morning stars dotted the indigo sky. Around us, crisp and melodious birdsong gradually began to rise. I stretched out my hand and pointed at the faint bluish-white light appearing at the distant horizon. In half an hour, the sun will leap out from there. At first, it'll be just a little orange red, slowly expanding, and in the blink of an eye, half the sky will look like it's burning. I chose divorce because I'd had enough of days like this, waiting with my eyes open for the sky to brighten. No matter how impressive the title of Mrs. Louise sounds, it can't give a person a good night's sleep. Emma followed my hand and looked over, then glanced behind me again. My shoulders suddenly grew heavier. A soft fleece blanket had been placed over me. Luis stood behind me with his hand lowered, his face somewhat pale. The wind is picking up. Keep warm. After we had talked things through last time, I had thought Luis would give up. Who knew that within 2 days, he would appear openly on set again? Unlike before, he no longer gave orders or interfered. He only sat quietly in a corner. Occasionally, when there were night scenes, he would drive over and wait nearby. Filming was already draining enough. I had tried asking Zach to persuade him twice, to no avail, so I simply let him be. No need. We're about to start filming. I pulled the blanket off my shoulders and casually placed it on the stool, wrapping my costume tighter around myself. I turned and walked away. Behind me, it seemed that Luis called my name, light and drifting, like morning mist. Once the wind blew, it scattered. Chapter 17. After 3 months, the film finally wrapped. After the final scene was shot, the crew members offered their applause one after another. Why hasn't the wrap bouquet arrived yet? Someone shouted loudly. As soon as the words fell, a tall figure came walking over. The people watching the scene automatically made way for him, then closed in again like a tide. Luis held an enormous bouquet of pink lychee roses in his arms. The layered, intricate petals trembled slightly with his steps, their tender pink color like clouds cut from the sunset. Congratulations on wrapping. He handed the bouquet to me with some nervousness. After a 2-second stalemate, I still reached out and accepted it. Luis visibly let out a breath of relief. I've thought about many things during this time. You were right. I was too arrogant before. I always thought your kindness to me was only natural. Only after watching how fully devoted you were while filming did I realize. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a staff member secretly raise a phone and aim it at us. I interrupted him. Thank you for the flowers. Although I don't like roses. Thank you anyway. The sweet, cloying fragrance drifted into my nose in strands. I casually handed the bouquet to Zach behind me. For a moment, Luis's face went blank. But Pablo said, he murmured, then abruptly stopped. Pablo said that every time I received roses in the past, I always looked very happy. I thoughtfully finished the sentence for him, then continued, that was because they were from you. Just like how, aside from filming and work needs, I really dislike exposing myself to other people's cameras and gazes. But I knew that sometimes, the company needed high-profile exposure. So there were paparazzi photos, a wedding live-streamed by the media, events and interviews we attended together, because doing those things made you happy. Luis staggered back 1 step. His shoulders and back, which had always been straight, seemed unable to hold themselves up and collapsed slightly, as though in the next second, something supporting his body would flee in panic. Chapter 18. Romeo's new film chose me as the female lead without any dispute. The moment she received the notice, Roxana let out a long breath of relief. With this film, your position can be considered stable. The film still needed time to prepare. Roxana efficiently packed me up and stuffed me into a travel variety show that claimed to be healing. Just treat it as a way to relax. She smiled. You can enjoy the scenery and get paid. Why wouldn't you go? How much? I asked casually. She gestured a number. That much? I was astonished. You didn't sell me off, did you? She only smiled without speaking. The variety show was a proper variety show, and it was extremely wealthy. Along the way, it did not even issue the usual missions found in regular variety shows. It was as if the production team's sole purpose was to send 5 popular celebrities and more than 100 staff members on a deep journey of physical and emotional purification. After the first episode of the Qinghai Gansu Grand Loop aired, the response was unexpectedly good. When Roxana called me, the surprise in her voice could not be hidden at all. The show has barely been airing, and several outdoor brands have already come knocking. Equal in number to the endorsements that came in, where the couple's viewers spontaneously started shipping on the show. Other managers tried to prevent their artists from getting into dating rumors. Why are you doing the opposite? Roxana snorted with a laugh. Please, you're single, famous, and beautiful. It's perfectly natural for people to ship you with anyone. What? Do they expect you to maintain cyber chastity or something? She coaxed me until I smiled brightly. Chapter 19. The final stop of the itinerary was a small island in southern Italy selected by the production team. Because I was busy with the makeup and costume tests for Romeo's new film, I arrived 2 days later than the main group. Duncan, who had a good relationship with me on the variety show, drove over to pick me up. The specially rented lemon yellow vintage car drove along the winding road. You're lucky. Duncan broke the silence. When we arrived 2 days ago, it was still rainy and gloomy. Today, it actually cleared up. I pulled myself together and smiled. There are 2 activities tomorrow. One is hiking and stream trekking in a canyon. The other is a free island tour. Which one do you choose? Stream trekking, I said without considering. Duncan was somewhat surprised. You? Can you handle that? We all thought you would choose the island tour. Perhaps he noticed that I was somewhat distracted. What's wrong? You don't seem very excited. The wheels turned right onto an empty side road. The familiar scenery was gradually left behind the car. I slowly relaxed and remembered Duncan's question. I've been here once before. When? During my honeymoon. I swallowed those words. A long time ago. For a certain instant. I almost thought the destination of this car would be the manor where Luis had once taken me to stay. Duncan nodded and tactfully stopped asking. Chapter 20. The next day's stream trekking trip consisted of only Duncan and me. The dense forest blocked out the sun, and jagged rocks rose everywhere. Before an hour had passed, my stamina was already running out. When it rains, it pours. While stepping through a shallow stream, my ankle was scraped by a raised stone beneath the water. During the few minutes we stopped to treat it, a dark cloud that had drifted over from who knew where hovered overhead. The valley was so quiet that not even the slightest sound of wind could be heard. The guide traveling with us looked grave. She walked more than 10 meters ahead alone and checked carefully. After returning, she decisively called over the director who had been following behind us. The 2 of them discussed seriously for a while. In the end, the director waved his hand and announced on the spot that everyone was to evacuate immediately, following everyone down the mountain, stumbling along with 1 foot deep and the other shallow. I found a moment to ask, what happened? The guide is afraid there might be a flash flood. She wants us to avoid danger early. As if in response to his words, a thunderclap suddenly exploded in the gloomy sky. The enormous sound shook the mountain rocks beneath our feet as if they were trembling along with it. The guide's expression changed. She stretched out her hand, pointed toward a slope, and shouted loudly. Even though we could not understand what she was saying, everyone understood at once. Everyone lowered their heads and ran in the direction she pointed. About 2 minutes later, a wooden cabin appeared on the hillside. Almost the moment we entered, rain began pouring down behind us. The shallow stream at the foot of the mountain, which had originally been so clear that the bottom could be seen, became unbearably muddy. Even the sound of pouring rain could not cover a more obvious, rushing rumble. In the blink of an eye, surging muddy water swept over. Several branches as thick as wrists rolled up and down on the surface of the water. Everyone felt lingering fear. Only the director remained deeply worried. With rain this heavy, the signal probably isn't good either. I took out my phone. Sure enough, where the signal should have been, 3 words were clearly displayed: no service. Chapter 21. The rain continued until night. Outside the wooden cabin was a stretch of mud. For safety reasons, the director could only let everyone rest in the cabin for the night. During that time, he kept trying to contact the outside world. Fortunately, after 1 night passed, the sky outside had already changed. The damp moisture and earthy smell of mud still lingered in the air, but the small path down the mountain was already clearly visible. After all that trouble, on the way back to the hotel, no one spoke. After the car had driven for some distance, the sounds of phone calls and message notifications began ringing one after another. The phone in my hand kept vibrating. Roxana's name jumped wildly on the screen. I glanced at the battery, which only had 2% left, and answered while looking for a charging cable. Roxana, I'm fine. Luis had an accident. Our voices rang out at the same time. I froze for a moment. I still wanted to ask more. But the phone screen went black and powered off completely. Chapter 22. Luis had been hospitalized. He had followed the search and rescue boat into the flash flood area and had accidentally fallen into the water. When he was pulled out, both his head and back had been cut by falling rocks, and he had lost too much blood. The largest sponsor behind the show had been injured, and it had happened while trying to save the artists and staff members. The entire production team wished they could collectively apologize to him. He stayed in the hospital for a week. Whenever the production staff had time, they ran to the hospital. Duncan came to me privately. Should we go visit him too? Yes. 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 You absolutely have to go. The director passing by had eyes shining as he clasped his hands together and bowed to me. MS. Olivia. Luis even asked whether you were all right a couple of days ago. Holding back a breath. I went together with Duncan and several camera operators from that day. Pablo was guarding the door of the hospital room. When he saw me, his attitude was as respectful as ever. The boss just fell asleep. It isn't convenient for him to see too many guests. Only one person should go in. The people around me all looked at me in unison. Then I'll go, I said in a muffled voice. The door opened, and the room was utterly silent. Perhaps he heard the movement. Luis, lying on his side on the bed, said impatiently, "Get out." "It's me." I felt somewhat awkward. Luis's body stiffened. He suddenly turned over and sat up, struggling to lean against the headboard. The circle of gauze wrapped around his forehead made him look somewhat haggard. He looked at me cautiously. "You came. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I explained. We had already evacuated before the flash flood came. Luis was silent for a moment, then gave an awkward laugh. "Yes, it's just that at the time, I heard the news that you had already gone into the mountains, and according to the schedule, you should have been right where the flash flood broke out. I also couldn't contact any of you, so He could not continue. He took a thin breath. His head tilted slightly back, and his Adam's apple rolled up and down. I said dryly, "No matter what. Thank you." Luis turned his gaze toward me. A thin glimmer of moisture flashed through his eyes. He said, "You're still leaving?" After a long silence, I said, "Yes." Luis slowly closed his eyes. "Then rest first. I won't disturb you anymore." "Why? Is even this not allowed?" After I turned around, Luis's voice followed faintly, carrying a powerless self-mockery. I did not look back. Maybe because, while people live in this world and walk so many roads, not a single one of them can be walked backward. And him? Are you sure he can walk with you? Luis turned his head and looked outside the hospital room. His jaw was tense, and he asked almost through gritted teeth, "If it isn't him, there will be someone else. Maybe there will be no one at all, and I can still walk alone. But you, Luis." I placed my hand on the doorknob. Before pulling the door open, I said one final sentence. "You have already wrapped here with me, a work that had already wrapped. No matter how many regrets remained, could not be changed." Chapter 23. After the variety show finished filming and I rested for 2 months, I threw myself into Romeo's crew. That was an experience I would not want to recall lightly afterward. During filming, the set was closed off, and all visits were refused. The crew shot on location in a plateau region. At first, almost everyone worked while breathing oxygen, yet Romeo was especially strict when it came to filming. He strove to push every actor to the extreme, forcing out that instant of intensely concentrated emotion just before collapse. Fortunately, that extreme effort brought generous rewards. In the first week after Mountains and Rivers was released, it broke the historical box office record for domestic films of the same genre. By awards season, it won so many domestic and international awards that we could barely hold them all. Not only did it sweep every major award, it was also selected as that year's submission for the Oscars. On the day I once again won Best Actress at the Golden Frame Awards. A certain person in charge from the organizing committee privately came to me. They apologized for the sudden arrangement from when I had previously won the award, and repeatedly assured me that there would definitely be no unexpected situation during the ceremony. That night, the host once again called out my name. Thunderous applause filled the hall. I wore a light satin suit and walked with brisk steps. The presenter smiled and handed me the trophy. All the lights shone on me, all eyes gathered on my face. In a daze, I seemed to see Luis in the crowd. For a moment, our eyes met, and he nodded at me. Then he turned around and slowly walked into the shadows. I took a deep breath and slowly smiled. The last time I stood here, I thought that was the brightest moment of my life. At this very moment, I want to say, Olivia, keep walking. There are still more beautiful views and higher peaks in your life.